Alpha King banished his pregnant mate and left her to die, until the moon goddess made him pay. High above the valleys, the castle loomed like a shadow against the silver moon, its towers sharp as knives and its stones cold with the weight of history. In the throne room, the Alpha King, Kalen, sat like a statue carved from obsidian, his gaze distant yet sharp. His crown glinted faintly under the torchlight, but it felt heavier than ever tonight. Word had come that changed everything. His mate, Leora, the woman whose presence once made him forget the burdens of the crown, carried his child. The news should have filled him with joy, yet a chill wrapped around his heart. Prophecies haunted Erendor like ghosts in the wind. One spoke of a king whose line would falter, whose child would bring ruin and change, and Kalen could not bear uncertainty, even when it meant sacrificing love. Leora walked into the throne room, her steps quiet but unwavering. The soft glow of her hair shimmered in the torchlight, and her eyes, deep, violet pools, met his with hope and trust. She had always trusted him, had always believed in his strength. But tonight, the unspoken tension between them thickened the air. "Kalen," she said softly, "what troubles you? You have not spoken to me all day." He looked at her, his jaw tight, lips pressed into a line that betrayed nothing. "It is not you, Leora," he said finally, his voice low, almost a whisper. "It is the child." Her eyes widened, filled with joy and fear at the same time. "The child, Kalen, we have waited for this moment. You must be happy. This is life." But Kalen shook his head, a shadow crossing his features. "Life can also be chains, Leora. This child, I fear it may bring what the prophets warned, a curse, a threat. I cannot risk it, not for the crown, not for the people." Leora took a step closer, her hand reaching for his. "You fear shadows, Kalen, but do not forget that love can be stronger than any prophecy. You are my strength, and now this child will be yours too. Do not let fear blind you." Kalen's eyes flickered, storm and sorrow colliding. "Love alone does not protect a kingdom," he said, the edge in his voice betraying the battle within. "I cannot allow the possibility of ruin to touch these walls. I must send you away." Leora froze, her hand falling to her side. Her heart pounded in disbelief, each beat heavier than the last. "Send me away? Kalen, you cannot. The child, our child, you cannot do this." "I must," he said, his voice firm now, resolute. The king's decision was made, ironclad and merciless. "I cannot risk my people for my heart. You will leave the castle tonight. You will go to the Wraithwood, and there you will live or die. The gods will decide your fate." Tears glistened in Leora's eyes, but she did not cry. She had expected his strength, yes, but not this coldness. "You are sending me to die." Kalen's gaze softened for a heartbeat, and for that moment the man behind the crown emerged. His hand hovered over hers, trembling slightly, as if he longed to change the impossible. "I am sorry, Leora, but the crown does not forgive weakness." With that, guards stepped forward, their armor clinking, and her fate was sealed. Night fell like a velvet shroud over Erendor as Leora was escorted from the castle. The Wraithwood lay beyond the mountains, a forest shrouded in dark magic, where even the wind seemed to whisper threats. Few had entered and returned, and none spoke of what lingered there. But Leora walked with her head held high, cradling her belly, her small act of defiance a silent promise to the life she carried. The moon rose high above the forest, silver and serene, casting shadows that danced among twisted trees and creeping fog. Leora stepped into the Wraithwood with caution, feeling the pulse of the ancient woods. Every step was a struggle, yet she could sense something strange, a quiet energy, both frightening and comforting, like the world itself held its breath. She stumbled once, her foot caught in gnarled roots, and the fog seemed to curl around her like a living thing. A soft voice whispered, almost carried by the wind. "Do not fear, you are not alone." Leora's heart leapt. She knew of the moon goddess, a deity of the night who protected those abandoned, those wronged, those who suffered. She had heard stories from the elders, tales of the goddess who could gift salvation, but always at a price. Leora whispered into the mist, "If you hear me, help my child." The forest seemed to sigh, a sound like rustling silk. Shadows stretched and shifted, and for the first time Leora felt hope. She knew survival was no longer only about her strength. It was about a force older, wiser, and far more powerful than any king. Days passed in the Wraithwood, each more harrowing than the last. Leora learned to listen to the whispers of the trees, to sense the presence of unseen creatures, and to protect herself with whatever tools the forest offered. Her body was weary, but her resolve burned brighter than any fear. Meanwhile, back in Urendor, Kalen could not escape the gnawing weight of his choice. The castle seemed colder, the halls emptier. Sleep eluded him as dreams of Leora and the child he had condemned twisted into nightmares. He saw her eyes, bright with defiance and hurt, and his heart ached with a longing he could not name. He tried to dismiss it, telling himself that rulers must be ruthless, that love was weakness, that the prophecy justified every action. Yet each night, the moon's silver glow seemed to haunt him, as if it carried Leora's voice across the mountains, whispering truth he could not bear. In the Wraithwood, Leora began to feel another presence, gentle, guiding, as if the forest itself leaned to protect her. One night she stumbled into a clearing where moonlight poured like liquid silver. The voice came again, stronger this time. "Child of the Alpha, you shall not perish," it said. "Your strength is your bond. Your child's life is not lost. But know this, the path will demand courage, and the king who cast you away will face the reckoning of his choices." Leora felt tears stream down her face, but this time they were not only of sorrow, they were tears of hope. She whispered, "I do not seek revenge. I only wish to survive for the child." The forest seemed to hum in answer, wrapping her in warmth despite the shadows that threatened from every side. That night, under the silver gaze of the moon, Leora swore to endure, to learn, and to grow stronger. The child she carried was not only her hope, it was the seed of a future the kingdom could not yet imagine. Yet Kaelin's presence lingered, invisible, like a shadow stretching across the mountains. The bond of mate and king, broken by fear and pride, still pulsed faintly in the ether. Every choice he made, every thought of Leora, began to unravel the certainty he once clung to. Weeks passed, and Leora's connection to the moon goddess deepened. She could sense the rhythms of the forest, the stirrings of spirits, the shifting winds, the heartbeat of life and death intertwined. The child within her seemed to move with purpose, as if aware of the destiny shaping around them. One night, as a storm rose over the mountains, Leora felt a sudden cold shiver and a pull toward the northern edge of the forest. There, she saw shadows twisting into shapes she could not name, creatures of mist and night, eyes glowing with hunger. Fear gripped her heart, but she stood her ground, remembering the voice of the moon goddess. "You are not alone," she whispered. "I will face this. I will protect you, my child." Lightning split the sky, illuminating the creatures for a brief instant. Their forms were monstrous, yet fleeting, and the forest's magic seemed to rise in response to her courage. The creatures receded, leaving only the whisper of the wind and the moonlight shining through broken clouds. Leora sank to her knees, exhausted yet resolute. She realized that survival was no longer enough. She needed mastery over the forest, over the shadows, over herself. And somewhere, she knew that Kaelin, the king who had banished her, would soon feel the consequences of the choice he had made in fear and pride. As the first rays of dawn pierced the fog, Leora looked toward the distant mountains. Her gaze was steady, unwavering, filled with a promise to the child she carried, to herself, and to the moon that had chosen her as its ward. And somewhere beyond the forest, the Alpha King stirred in his sleep, haunted by visions he could not escape. The wind seemed to carry her name, and the weight of what he had done pressed on his chest like iron chains. He would soon learn that the gods and the moon itself did not forget betrayal. The story of Leora's survival had begun, and the reckoning was yet to come. The Wraithwood had changed Leora. Its twisted trees, shadowed paths, and whispered winds no longer frightened her, they spoke to her. Every step she took was measured, careful, yet full of quiet confidence. The forest pulsed with life and magic, older than the kingdom she had left behind, and it accepted her presence. She had not only survived, she had begun to understand the forest, its secrets, and its power. The moon goddess, unseen but always felt, had begun to awaken something within her, a thread of magic that connected her to the night, the shadows, and the spirits that drifted among the trees. One evening, under a moon that seemed larger and brighter than ever, Leora felt a strange pull, a tug at her very soul. She followed it through winding paths where mist curled like silver smoke. The forest thickened, trees bending as if bowing to her passage. Then in a small clearing she found it, a pool of water so still and dark that it reflected not only her image but something deeper, something she could not name. "You have come far, child of the Alpha," a voice said. Leora's heart leapt. The voice was gentle yet commanding, and it carried through the clearing as though it belonged to the wind itself. "Moon goddess," Leora whispered, falling to her knees. "It is you." "I am here always," the voice replied, soft like a lullaby, yet sharp like steel. "You were cast away, but you are not forgotten. I have seen the suffering of your heart, the strength of your spirit, and the life you carry within you. The king, the one who abandoned you, he must pay for the choice he made." Leora's hands clenched her belly, warmth and fear mingling in her chest. "I do not seek revenge," she said firmly. "I only want to survive, to protect my child." The moonlight shimmered over the pool, and Leora felt a current of energy pass through her. It was not violent or harsh, it was patient, deliberate, and illuminating. She could feel it in her mind, a whisper of knowledge, a surge of power she did not yet understand. "You will need strength," the goddess said. "You will need wisdom. But know this, the king who cast you aside will feel the weight of your trials. The bonds of love, betrayal, and power are stronger than any spell or sword. Soon, he will know your presence and the consequences of his choice." Leora rose, her chest steady, her gaze unwavering. She could feel it, her body, her mind, even her unborn child thrumming with power. It was subtle, like a heartbeat within the forest itself, but undeniable. She had begun to change, and the change frightened her as much as it thrilled her. The first night of her transformation came swiftly. Shadows gathered at the edges of the clearing, dark shapes moving with intent. Wolves with eyes like burning embers prowled just beyond the tree line, their low growls vibrating through the soil. Leora's instinct was to run, yet her courage rooted her to the ground. "Do not fear them," the moon goddess's voice whispered. "You are no longer powerless." Leora lifted her hands instinctively, and the shadows recoiled. The wolves froze, their growls fading into whines of confusion. The air around her shimmered, as if the forest recognized the shift in her energy. She felt the pulse of life around her, the trees, the wind, the soil, and realized she could move it, guide it, and protect herself. By dawn, she was exhausted, but she understood something vital. She was no longer the woman Kaelin had sent away. She was becoming something more, a protector, a force, a mother who could command power no one could yet imagine. Back in the castle of Urindor, Kaelin felt the change as well. It began subtly, a tug at his conscience he could not name, a shadow of unease that followed him in every quiet moment. He walked the halls at night, the weight of the crown pressing down more heavily than ever. Every torch, every echo, seemed to remind him of the mate he had abandoned, and the child he had tried to erase from his life. He dreamed of her often, vivid dreams that twisted his sleep into agony. In one she stood in the Wraithwood, surrounded by silver mist, holding a child whose eyes glimmered with the moon's light. Her gaze met his, and he felt every wound he had inflicted as if it were carved into his own chest. Kaelin awoke with a start, chest heaving. Pride, his lifelong armor, felt fragile. Anger, the weapon he had wielded for years, felt hollow. He could not deny it any longer. He had been wrong, and the weight of that truth was beginning to crush him. Meanwhile, in the Wraithwood, Leora began to encounter more than just the natural and the spiritual. Strange creatures emerged, neither fully alive nor completely ghostly, drawn by her presence. Some were curious, some wary, some hostile. She learned to speak to them with gestures, with whispers, with a force she felt growing inside her. The forest, in turn, seemed to bend around her will. It tested her, but it also taught her. One night, she was confronted by a shadow unlike any she had seen. It was tall, dark, with eyes like burning coals and a presence that made the ground tremble. Fear gripped her heart, but she remembered the goddess's words. "You are no longer powerless." Drawing in a deep breath, Leora stepped forward. "I am not afraid," she said, her voice steady, carrying through the mist. "Leave or face the consequences of your choice." The shadow moved closer, and a terrible cold swept over her, but she stood firm. She felt her energy rise, a force connected to the moon, to the forest, to the child she carried. With a sudden surge, the shadow recoiled, shrinking back into the trees before vanishing entirely. Leora sank to her knees, shaking but triumphant. "I can do this," she whispered to herself. "I will protect my child. I will survive." Days later, as the forest seemed to settle around her, Leora felt a disturbance, an energy unlike any she had felt before. The wind carried a scent of iron and stone, and the ground trembled beneath her feet. She turned toward the northern edge of the Wraithwood, where the forest thickened, and saw a figure moving with purpose. It was Kaelin. His presence was unmistakable, even from a distance, the Alpha King, powerful, proud, and unaware of the storm awaiting him. But Leora did not run. She had grown stronger, and the forest itself seemed to respond to her courage. Kaelin's eyes widened when he saw her. She stood tall and radiant in the moonlight, shadows swirling around her like protective wings. The woman he had abandoned was no longer fragile, no longer dependent on him, and no longer bound by fear. His heart ached with longing, guilt, and the beginnings of understanding. "Leora," he breathed, the single word heavy with emotion. You survived." "I did," she said, her voice calm but powerful. "Not because of you, Kaelin. I survived because I had to. I survived for our child, and I survived for myself." He took a step forward, his pride warring with his guilt. I have come to—" "You have come too late," she interrupted, her eyes blazing. "You sent me here to die. Do you understand what that means? Every day I face death. Every night I prayed to the moon, not to you, not to your crown, and still I survived." Kaelin lowered his gaze, ashamed. I thought I was protecting you. I was wrong." The forest seemed to hum around them, a quiet acknowledgement of the truth in her words. Leora felt the power within her, the bond with the forest, and the promise of the moon goddess. She realized that Kaelin would have to face the consequences, not just for her sake, but for the child's, for the kingdom, and for the very balance of their fates. "You will feel the weight of your choices, Kaelin," she said softly. "The moon goddess will make sure of it, and perhaps then you will understand what it means to love without fear or pride." Kaelin reached out, almost instinctively, but she stepped back. "Do not touch me yet," she said. "Not until you have learned humility. Not until you have truly seen the cost of your actions. Only then, maybe we can speak of the past, of forgiveness, and of the future." A storm gathered in the distance, lightning splitting the sky, illuminating the twisted shapes of the forest. Leora looked toward the horizon, her senses alert. She knew this was only the beginning. The Wraithwood had taught her survival, the moon goddess had begun to awaken her power, and Kaelin's reckoning was approaching. And somewhere, hidden in the shadows, the future stirred. The child within her moved, small but insistent, as if aware of the destiny that awaited them both. Leora placed a hand on her belly, feeling the life she had fought to protect, and whispered a promise. "I will not fail you. I will protect you, no matter what comes." The moon rose higher, silver and unyielding, and the wraithwood seemed to shimmer in acknowledgement. The forest, the goddess, and the child, their power, their destiny, were now intertwined. And Kaelin, the king who had cast her away, would soon understand that love and power were never so easily separated. The forest held its breath, the shadows waited, and the first threads of the curse began to weave themselves around the king's fate. Leora, standing tall in the clearing, understood the truth. She had survived death, betrayal, and fear. Now she would survive destiny itself. The reckoning had begun. The wraithwood had grown silent. Or perhaps it was Leora herself who had changed the forest's rhythm. Shadows no longer slithered with menace but moved like silent watchers, as though the very trees acknowledged her presence. The moonlight touched every leaf and branch with silver, and the fog lay heavy yet gentle around her, wrapping her in a protective embrace. Leora stood at the heart of the forest, a clearing bathed in moonlight. She felt the pulse of the forest beneath her feet, the life within the trees, the stirrings of creatures both mortal and magical. Her power had grown steadily, nurtured by the moon goddess, yet it was not the only force at work. She could feel another presence approaching, one that stirred the air and the earth in a way that demanded attention. Kaelin had entered the wraithwood. Not as a king commanding his court, not as a man protected by soldiers, but as a man stripped of certainty, burdened by guilt, and drawn by a force he did not understand. The forest seemed to resist his presence, roots curling like fingers, shadows reaching toward him, testing his strength of heart. When he finally saw her, standing tall, radiant, the shadows swirling protectively around her like silver wings, his breath caught. She was no longer the fragile mate he had sent away. She was a force, luminous and terrifying, her gaze steady and unwavering. "Leora," he said, his voice low and rough, like gravel over water. I came to," she lifted a hand, the gesture gentle but firm. Shadows lifted in response, forming barriers around her. "Do not speak yet," she said, her voice calm but powerful. "Not until you understand the cost of your actions. Not until you feel what it means to betray love for pride." Kaelin swallowed hard, his pride chafing like a chain. He could not retreat, though he wished the ground would open and swallow him. "I am here because I cannot live knowing what I did," he said, each word heavy with sincerity. "I cannot bear the thought of you in danger, the thought of our child in danger." Her violet eyes narrowed, fierce and commanding. "You speak of danger, yet you brought me here yourself. You sent me into the wraithwood believing I would die. You abandoned the child you swore to protect. Do you understand what that means?" "I do now," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I understand every moment of pain I caused, every fear I forced upon you. I understand more than I thought I could. I am sorry, Leora." More than words can say. The wind shifted around them, carrying with it whispers of the forest and the subtle hum of the moon goddess. Leora felt the pulse of the magic rising, the forest responding to her heart, her courage and her power. She had survived not only the wraithwood but the betrayal, the fear, and the loneliness. She was not fragile, she was luminous, and she would test the king who had wronged her. "You will face the consequences of your choice, Kaelin," she said softly, yet with weight that bent the air. "The moon goddess will ensure that you understand what it means to hurt those you love. You will not leave this forest unchanged, nor will you leave unchanged in spirit. You must learn humility, courage, and the power of true love. Only then can we speak of the future." Kaelin bowed his head, humility forced upon him not by words but by the force of the forest and the truth in Leora's eyes. The forest seemed to test him, roots shifting underfoot, shadows curling around him, as if to measure the strength of his repentance. "Tell me what I must do," he said, voice low. "I will do anything to prove that I am worthy, that I am not the man who sent you here." Leora's gaze softened, though it did not lose its strength. "You will face trials. You will feel the echoes of every choice you made. You will confront shadows you do not yet understand, shadows of fear, pride, and regret. Only when you have endured, truly endured, can you approach me again without the weight of your past upon your shoulders. Kalen nodded, swallowing hard. The forest seemed to stir at his acceptance, winds rustling leaves, the ground pulsing beneath him as though acknowledging the beginning of his journey. The first trial came swiftly. The forest shifted and twisted, paths rearranging as if alive. Shadows congealed into shapes, creatures of mist and night, eyes glowing with hunger. They moved toward Kalen, and he felt the weight of his guilt manifest in the form of fearsome, unseen forces. Leora stepped forward, raising her hand. Shadows danced around her fingers, responding to her will. "Step back, Kalen," she said. "This is your path, but you will not be destroyed without learning. Watch, learn, and endure." Kalen drew in a breath, summoning every ounce of courage, and faced the shadows. They lunged, twisting forms that mirrored his fears. The memory of her betrayal, his child's danger, the loneliness he had caused her. He faltered, but each step he took forward, each moment he endured, burned away a fraction of his pride. Leora watched, her heart heavy with both hope and sorrow. She had survived, and now she would see if he could too. The night stretched on, each shadow an echo of the past, and each challenge a step toward understanding and redemption. Hours passed. The forest seemed endless, a living entity testing both of them in its own way. Kalen faced visions of Leora's fear, of nights spent alone, of the agony of watching her grow strong without him. Each vision struck him like a physical blow, yet he endured. He gritted his teeth, fought the despair, and learned something he had never known. Humility is heavier than a crown, and true courage is born not from strength alone but from love and remorse. Finally, as dawn approached, the shadows dispersed, dissolving into mist that rose into the sky. Kalen fell to his knees, exhausted, sweat and tears mingling on his face. The forest was silent, yet its silence was filled with acknowledgement, a promise that the first trial had been completed. Leora approached, her steps light but purposeful. She placed a hand on his shoulder, the touch gentle yet commanding. "You have survived the first trial," she said. "You have faced your fears and felt the weight of your choices, but there are more trials ahead. This is only the beginning." Kalen looked up at her, the forest's mist curling around them like guardians. "I am ready," he said. "I will endure whatever comes for you, for the child, for the life I tried to destroy." Her violet eyes softened, and for a moment he saw not only the strength she had gained but the lingering love that had never fully vanished. "Then we move forward," she said. "Together but not equal in power. Not yet. The moon goddess guides you and I will teach you, but you must walk your path before you can stand beside me." The day passed into night once more, and the forest seemed to pulse with anticipation. The wraithwood had changed them both. Leora's power had grown, tempered by courage, compassion, and the divine guidance of the moon goddess. Kalen's pride had been tested, broken, and reshaped into humility and strength born of endurance. Yet the greatest trial was yet to come. A darkness lingered at the edges of the forest, something ancient, something tied to the prophecy that had caused Kalen to act in fear. The moon goddess's whispers grew more urgent, urging Leora to prepare for a confrontation that would decide not only their fates, but the fate of the child and the kingdom itself. As night fell, Leora stood at the edge of a cliff overlooking the forest, the moon full and silver above her. Kalen approached, his steps careful, his gaze unwavering. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what was to come. "Do you feel it?" she asked softly. "The forest, the power, the shadow that waits." Kalen nodded, his heart pounding. "I feel it. I understand now why you survived, why you grew stronger. I will face it no matter what it is." A gust of wind swept across the cliff, carrying with it a sense of something vast and powerful approaching. Leora's heart quickened, and the child within her stirred. She knew this was not just a trial for Kalen, not just a test of her own abilities, but a confrontation with a force that had waited for centuries to rise. The shadows at the forest's edge began to writhe and twist, forming shapes too terrible and magnificent to name. Their eyes glowed with the light of the moon, and their presence pressed down on both of them, a reminder that destiny was not kind and prophecy was never gentle. Leora took Kaelin's hand, her grip firm and steady. "We face this together," she said. "You have learned humility and I have grown stronger. Together we can endure the darkness. Together we can protect our child. But know this, the moon goddess has chosen this path and we must follow it fully. There is no turning back." Kaelin's hand tightened around hers, and for the first time in weeks he felt not fear, not doubt, but purpose. "I will not fail you again," he said, his voice steady. "I will walk this path no matter the cost. I will stand with you." The forest shivered as if in acknowledgement, and the shadows drew closer, twisting and coiling, ready to test them both. The first trial of courage and endurance had passed. The second, the trial of destiny and confrontation with darkness, had begun. And above it all, the moon glowed, a silver sentinel watching over the child who carried the hope of the future and the parents whose choices would shape it. The collision of fates had begun. The wraithwood had grown restless. The shadows at its edges pulsed like living things, moving with intent, and the moon hung heavy in the sky, casting silver light over every twisted tree and fog-shrouded path. Leora stood at the heart of the forest, her child moving gently within her, a heartbeat of life and promise. Beside her, Kaelin stood tall but wary, his pride tempered by the trials he had endured. "You feel it, don't you?" Leora whispered, her violet eyes scanning the misty edges of the clearing. "The darkness approaches. It has waited centuries to rise. Tonight we face it." Kaelin swallowed hard. The weight of his mistakes pressed upon him like iron, yet he had learned humility, endurance, and the depth of love that had been hidden beneath his pride. "I feel it," he said. "I will not falter, not again." The wind stirred, carrying with it a chill that penetrated their bones. Shadows rose from the forest floor, twisting and writhing like serpents made of smoke. Eyes glowed from within them, red, green, and golden, reflecting the moonlight in a terrifying display. This was the darkness the moon goddess had warned them about, the force tied to the prophecy, tied to Kaelin's fear, tied to the very child whose birth had been feared. Leora stepped forward, lifting her hands. Shadows around her moved with a purpose she had never before commanded. The forest itself seemed to bend, creating barriers of roots and light to protect them. "We must face it together," she said. "You have learned courage. Now show me the strength of your heart." Kaelin nodded, feeling the forest pulse beneath his feet, a rhythm that matched his own heartbeat. He had been a king of might, but now he was a man of understanding, of love tempered by remorse. He stepped beside her, and together they faced the first wave of the darkness. The shadows surged forward, coalescing into a monstrous figure larger than any tree, its body a swirl of black smoke and flickering fire. Its eyes glowed like molten gold, and every movement carried the weight of centuries. Kaelin's breath caught. The creature was the embodiment of every fear he had ever held, every mistake he had ever made, every consequence he had ignored. "Do not let fear control you," Leora whispered, her voice calm yet commanding. "Remember what you have learned. Remember the child, remember the love, remember the strength within you." Kaelin took a deep breath and stepped forward. He could feel the weight of the shadows pressing down on him, threatening to crush him. Yet he remembered the trials, the visions, the nights spent confronting his pride. He lifted his hands, not in command but in unity with Leora, and felt the forest, the moonlight, and the power within them respond. The darkness hesitated. It had not expected this. The king, once cold and unyielding, now stood with humility, courage, and love shining through him. The forest itself seemed to push against the shadows, guiding the couple's strength, amplifying it, turning it into a force that even the ancient darkness could not ignore. Leora moved gracefully, the moonlight reflecting from her hair and eyes like silver fire. She chanted softly, words that were not human yet carried meaning. Shadows bent and twisted at her command, not as weapons but as shields and guides. Every step she took was deliberate, every movement flowing with magic that was hers and hers alone. Kalen followed her, matching her rhythm. He did not command, he harmonized. He did not strike, he endured. He did not dominate, he protected. And in this harmony, a power emerged that neither had known before, a bond between them, strengthened by trials, by suffering, and by love. The darkness roared, a sound like thunder and fire mixed. It lashed out, striking the forest, uprooting trees, sending mist and leaves swirling like a storm. Kalen was knocked off balance, yet Leora caught his arm, steadying him. "Together," she said. "Do not falter, we face it as one." He met her gaze, and in that moment, years of pride, fear, and regret melted away. "Together," he echoed, and they advanced, side by side, facing the darkness with courage that had been forged in pain and tempered in love. The battle was not one of swords or weapons. It was a battle of wills, of hearts, of unity. The shadows of the darkness lashed, but the combined force of Kalen and Leora, amplified by the forest and the moon goddess, met it at every turn. Every strike of the shadows was countered by their bond. Every attempt to divide them was met with trust. Every fear projected upon them dissolved in courage. As the night deepened, the darkness faltered. Its massive form shimmered, revealing a shape that seemed almost human, tangled in smoke, eyes blazing with centuries of hatred and fear. It reached toward them, its voice a whisper in Kalen's mind. "Fear me, suffer, you will pay." Kalen shook his head. "No," he said firmly. "I am not the man I was. I have learned humility. I have learned love. I will not be ruled by fear." Leora stepped closer to him, her hand resting over his heart. "You are ready," she said softly. "Now let us end this together." The shadows shrieked, thrashing and twisting, but Leora raised her hands, and a silver light poured from the moon itself, channeled through her and into Kalen. The forest pulsed with energy, and the darkness could not withstand the unity of hearts, the strength of courage, and the force of love realized. With one final surge, the shadows collapsed, dissolving into mist that rose toward the sky, leaving the clearing silent. The forest exhaled as if relieved, and the moonlight seemed to shine brighter, warmer, and protective. Kalen fell to his knees, exhausted but alive. Leora knelt beside him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "We did it," she whispered, a smile breaking through her exhaustion. "We survived the darkness, together." Kalen looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude, love, and awe. I could not have done this without you. You are incredible, Leora. You have always been incredible." Her smile softened, violet eyes shimmering with moonlight. "We are incredible together," she said, "and we will protect our child together. That is the bond we share, stronger than fear, stronger than pride, stronger than any darkness." For a moment they sat in the silver glow, the forest around them peaceful, alive, and renewed. The child stirred gently within Leora, a small but insistent heartbeat of life and promise. Leora placed her hand over her belly. "This is the future," she whispered. "A life born of love, courage, and hope, and we will guide it, protect it, and cherish it." Kalen reached over, covering her hand with his. "I will not fail again," he promised. "I will stand with you always. I will protect our child, protect you, protect the life we build together. You have shown me what it means to be a man worthy of love and trust. I am reborn because of you." The moon goddess's voice echoed softly through the clearing, a whisper carried on the wind. "You have walked your paths, faced your trials, and proven the strength of your hearts. Love, courage, and unity prevail. Your destiny is now your own." Leora smiled at the sky, feeling the goddess's presence in the gentle sway of the trees, the silver light of the moon, and the pulse of life around her. "Thank you," she whispered, "for guiding us, for teaching us, for protecting us." Kalen stood slowly, pulling her to her feet. They faced the horizon together, side by side, a king and his mate, changed by trials, strengthened by love, and bound by destiny. The wraithwood behind them shimmered with magic and life, no longer a place of fear, but a sanctuary that had witnessed their transformation. The first light of dawn crept over the mountains, and the mist of the forest glowed with soft gold and silver. The shadows of the night had passed, the darkness defeated, and the future stretched ahead, bright and uncertain but full of promise. Kalen turned to Leora, his eyes filled with determination and love. "We have faced the darkness and survived," he said. "But the kingdom, the world, it will not wait. We must return, not as before, but as partners, as equals, as protectors of what we love." Leora nodded, her hand brushing against her belly. "Yes, but we do so not in fear, not in pride, but in unity. Together we can shape the future, not as rulers of a kingdom alone, but as guardians of life, love, and hope." For the first time in weeks, they walked side by side, not as alpha and mate bound by duty and fear, but as two hearts intertwined, tempered by trials and bound by love stronger than any curse, stronger than any shadow, stronger than any prophecy. The wraithwood faded behind them, still alive with magic, whispers, and the blessing of the moon goddess. Ahead, the mountains and the kingdom awaited, a world that would see not only the return of its king and queen, but also the dawn of a new era, one born of courage, redemption, and unshakable love. And in the quiet of the forest, under the watchful silver moon, the promise of the child echoed like a heartbeat through the trees, a new life, a new hope, and a future forged from the trials of the past. The reckoning was over, the transformation complete. The bonds of love, courage, and unity would guide them forward, forever changed, forever strong.